We're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Julia Lawless. I am the Director of Undergraduate Admissions here at Jacksonville University. We're so excited that everyone is coming to join us in the fall with our community, especially with aviation. We have quite a large class coming in, and so we felt it was in our best interest to support you all with some general information about what families need to prepare, how to best prepare, an experience from a student's perspective, and just really to bring us all together before we have our orientation session, which we'll talk a little bit about in a few minutes. So hopefully you are feeling a little bit more prepared after this evening's event. Thank you all for submitting your questions. There were some great questions on there, and we are really confident that we'll have most of them answered by the end of this event, but please do not hesitate to reach out if you have anything additional. Like I mentioned, we will have the Q&A turned on once our brief presentation is complete. And I just wanted to introduce a few individuals that are joining us today to support some of the conversation, answer some of your questions, but also we'll be working with all of your students once they attend JU. We have Christine Hughes. She's our Associate Director of Aviation. She's going to be giving us a brief presentation shortly. We have Jenna Schilling. She's our Akron scheduler and our representative. She's our liaison between JU. She knows a lot of our current students, and she works really, really hard to make sure that everybody is organized and has flight blocks. We have Lori and Mark Milovich. They are parents of Brandon and Ryan Milovich. Brandon is a rising junior in aviation, so we have a parent perspective. And Ryan is actually soon to be a double dolphin. He's actually going into his third year at our law school. And last but not least, we have our student perspective, an amazing student representative of JU, but also in our aviation department, Austin Parrish. He is our third year student coming from Virginia Beach. So we welcome you all to ask additional questions. We will be pinpointing most of the questions that you had provided before, but to kick us off, I'm going to pass this to Christine Hughes for a short presentation.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. We're excited to have you here with us tonight, and we're really excited to have you here with us in the fall. So we are just going to jump right in and give you guys lots of information, hopefully answer the majority of the questions that you have. So just a brief overview. These are the topics that I'll be covering in my presentation. We'll be talking about aviation management versus aviation management and flight operations. We'll be going over materials that you all will need for this fall, medical certificates, what it looks like to come in with a private pilot's license versus not, what flight blocks and flight lab costs are like, and just some really important takeaways. So we'll go ahead and get started. As you all are aware, we have two main majors within the aviation program. We have aviation management, and then we have aviation management and flight operations. So a lot of the information in the beginning part of this call is going to be geared towards aviation management and flight operations students, but I want to say a few things for our aviation management students. And there will be something at the end for you all too when I'm towards the end of my presentation. So please hang in there with us as we talk over the aviation management and flight operations materials. For our aviation management majors, as you might be aware, some of you may be aware, we have 3 tracks within aviation management. So you can do airport management, airline management, or air traffic control. You don't need to select that right away. That's something that you can explore and think about as you're taking your classes your first year or two. One thing that I recommend is if you're interested and you have time, it's not very many more classes to do all 3 tracks. So that's my one tip for aviation management students. Another thing I just wanted to touch in is I know there was some questions about aviation management students being able to use the Redbird simulators. And yes, you guys absolutely can use our Redbird simulators in the aviation program. All any of our students have to do is just be checked out. We'll go over that in orientation, how you can do that. But you all are welcome to use those simulators too. And then for aviation management and flight operations students, you guys, the majority of you are the commercial pilot track. But we also have ROTC tracks, both the Navy and the Marine tracks, and then an international track that's really specialized for just a few of our students. All right, so we're going to jump into some of the materials that you guys will need. This was sent out in an email that I sent out a couple weeks ago, actually. with a list, multiple lists in there of all the different items that you'll need to get started with us in the fall. So there was one list that just lists all the needed items. And then there was another document that lists all the performance packs. So there's two different ways that you can obtain the items that you'll need for this fall. If you want to buy all the items yourself, some of you might have items from doing some flight training already outside of JU. You certainly can do that. You don't need to buy the performance pack. So if you just need one or two of the things and you have the other items already, then by all means, go ahead and do that on your own. If you don't have anything and you would like to not have to worry about going through and making sure that you purchase all the correct items, then we offer the performance pack that you can purchase through Acron. There's 3 different levels that you all saw in the document, and you can select the level that's best, that is most appropriate for you. I will say the tier 1 level, or that top level, includes everything that you'll need. And so then if you already have a lot of items and you just need some of the documentation and checklists and things like that, then you might be looking more towards the tier 3 package. That might be a better level for you. But whichever is best for you, we do recommend, even if you're coming in with all the other items, that you probably it is best to purchase the tier 3 package from Acron so that you do have the correct items for what you'll need out at the airport, like the correct checklists and the correct fuel jar and things like that. So I hope that clears that up. But if you all have questions, again, you're welcome to ask us. There's information on the document that explains how to purchase the performance pack and what you need to go through to get that item. I do always get a few questions on what items students need, like if they need an iPad, which you do, what iPad is best. And a lot of that, we put notes in that list because a lot of it is up to the student. It's really student preference. Some students like a bigger iPad because they want to be able to see their charts really well, or some prefer a smaller iPad because they want it to take up less space on their lap. So it really is student preference on what iPad you select. So that's just something to consider as well. In terms of medical certificates, everyone needs to have a medical certificate to start their flight training in the fall. There's no way that you can start flight training without your medical certificate. You are only required to have a 3rd class medical certificate to start your flight training, but we strongly encourage students to get a 1st class medical certificate. On the medical certificate document that we sent out, there's a website, it's flightphysical.com. You can go on that website, put in the zip code where you live, and it will give you a list of medical examiners that are in your area. We recommend making that appointment sooner rather than later. It can take a little while, sometimes depending on where you live, to get in with a medical examiner. So if you haven't done so yet, please go ahead and make that appointment. In terms of 1st class versus 3rd class, I typically get questions on, if I get a 1st class, do I have to continue to renew that 1st class certificate? And you do not. You just get that 1st class certificate the very initial time that you go, and you won't have to renew that 1st class certificate again until you're ready to use that 1st class certificate when you go on to the airlines. We recommend that you get that 1st class certificate right now, though, before you start training, so you know that you'll qualify for it. If you wait and then just get a 3rd class and try to get a 1st class later, sometimes the FAA will say, we want to delve a little deeper into your background, and they'll want more information on your medical history or procedures that you've had. While they're doing that deep dive into your background, they typically take away the medical certificate that you have. So if they've given you a 3rd class, they typically remove that while they're doing more research. So that means you could complete your training, be at the end of your training and ready to move on, and no longer have your 3rd class medical certificate and be stuck. So it's much better to have that happen in the beginning. If that does happen, that has happened to a few students. It happens every year. What those students do is they start taking some of their other classes. They can still take their ground school class. They just can't start their flight training until that medical certificate paperwork is complete. TSA requirements, that's at the bottom of that medical certificate page document. And that's something you have to do, even if you've been doing flight training at another flight school. Anytime you move to a new flight school, you have to do the TSA check. So the big thing for this is please, please, please don't forget to bring your birth certificate or your passport. Every fall, we have a lot of students that call home to have those items FedExed down because the students forgot to bring them with them. So please make sure that you bring those with you, and then those can be sent back home once we've verified your identity out at the airport. Okay. Let's see. So another question moving on is just to talk a little bit about the private pilot's license. A lot of folks are wondering if they have to have a private pilot's license. The question, and that answer is no, not at all. Most of our students come in without their private pilot's license. We have some students that come in with very little experience at all. We do recommend, if you have not done any flight training, to do a discovery flight. And that's just a short flight that you take at a local airport with a flight instructor, and they'll get you up in the air. And once you get out into the practice area away from the airport, they'll let you take control of the aircraft and fly for a little bit. Most people do it and they love it, and they're absolutely excited to start their flight training. But every so often someone does that and they think this is not the right fit. So we definitely recommend a discovery flight, but outside of that, you do not need to have any experience whatsoever. If you have been working on your flight training and you're planning to arrive with your private pilot's license, then your private pilot's license is required. You do have to have that completed if you're planning to arrive with it completed. So if you're really close and you're just a few hours away, or you're just waiting on the check ride, that's not having your private pilot's license completed. Unfortunately, if that is the case, if you arrive to JU without that certificate, even if the temporary certificate is fine, but you have to have completed the check ride and passed, then you do have to start over with us. So that means you start at lesson 1, the first part of that very first fall semester. So we always recommend that if you're working on your private pilot's license, that you try to get it done as early as possible in the summer. We're past that date. I usually recommend that students aim to have it completed by May. It can be difficult to get a check ride. It can also be difficult to get that check ride completed because of weather or other reasons. So we do strongly encourage students to make sure that they've got that scheduled and they get that completed. If you were planning to come in with your private pilot's license completed and you weren't able to finish your rating, let us know as soon as possible, so that if you were planning to come in with it, we have you slotted as starting with as an instrument student. And we need to change that. We may not be able to get you a flight block right away, depending on when your instrument flight block was, but we will work to get you changed, and we also need to get you changed to the correct ground school. So, so please make sure that you let us know as soon as possible if that's changing. Let's see. To have your private pilot, by the time that we start, you have to have it completed before classes start. So we recommend that students have that completed before they come down for orientation week. So aim to have it completed, by August 10th would be the absolute last date that you could have that completed. We've gotten some questions on what documents students should be submitting and how they should be submitting those documents. An email was sent out today by Akron that came through FSP, that's Flight Schedule Pro, and that email had the information that students need to get set up in Flight Schedule Pro, to get their login set up, and then once they get that completed, there's a document that tells them how to upload the documentation that's needed. Once that's complete, then there's an email that they can send saying, I've done all this, I've completed it, and I've also uploaded my documentation. So that, if you didn't receive that, Jenna can speak to this a little bit later too, if there's more questions on this, but if you didn't receive that, then we can make sure that you get that. But you all should have received that and be able to submit that documentation as soon as you can. If you come in with your private pilot's license completed, then you go right into your instrument training. So we have those students slotted to do instrument ground school. And then you'll also start with AVO 213, which is Instrument Flight Lab A. So what that means along with what your degree path will look like is that you're really taking off about a year of flight training overall. So the way we kind of have the ratings laid out is private pilot is the first year, instrument is the second year, commercial multi-engine and commercial single is the third year, and then flight instructor and flight instructor instrument is the fourth year. So if you come in with your private pilot, then you just have those 3 years remaining. One thing that I touch on in our information sessions, and I don't want to go too far into this, but just I'll talk about a little bit too with flight labs, is that flight labs are the only class that you can register for outside of the add drop date. So the pace at which you finish those ratings is really up to the student. You don't have to wait until the next semester to sign up for the next lab if you're ready to move on to that next lab. So we have some students that come in that are able to finish their ratings in a shorter period of time because they fly throughout the year. We have other students that take their time and spread the ratings out over, and do maybe one per year. So it's really up to each student the speed at which you complete your ratings. All right. We have assigned quite a few flight blocks. We still have a lot of students that have not been assigned a flight block just yet, but the majority of the students have been assigned a flight block for the fall. Flight blocks were assigned based on the date that the student deposited, as well as the date that the student returned their course registration survey. So we put those two dates together to give them a spot in line for a flight block. So students are given flight blocks based on what's available and what we have open. Private pilot students typically get flight blocks during the day. They do because they need to be able to see outside. They need reference to the outside. A lot of our instrument students are getting more of nighttime flight blocks because they don't need that outside reference so they're able to fly during the night. Flight blocks are 3.5 hours. So it's a 60-minute pre-flight, 2 hours dedicated to flight time, and then a 30-minute post-flight. When you see the flight blocks under My Cove on your JU schedule, the flight blocks are actually blocked out at 4.5 hours. And we do that to allow 30 minutes to get from campus to the airport and 30 minutes to get back. It's only about a 15-minute drive, but that just gives students that extra time so they're not rushing to get out of class or rushing to get back to class. Really quick along those lines, I saw that there were a couple of questions about transportation. The university does not provide transportation from the campus to the airport, so students are responsible for their own transportation. There is room to have cars on campus, so we recommend cars and bringing a car to campus. If you're not able to bring a car to campus, we have a lot of students in each flight block. So there's lots of students that you can reach out to and that you can carpool with. And if you let us know those first couple weeks of school, either myself or Nikki, our office manager, will send emails out to the other students and say, this student is in this flight block and they need a carpool. And our students are really good about answering back and offering to give rides. I do not recommend that a student uses an e-bike or a scooter. Those are not safe ways to get from campus to the airport. There's a highway involved and lots of busy roads, so I definitely would not recommend that you do that. Ubers can get expensive, so carpooling or bringing your own car is the best way to get back and forth. We have a question. The next question is about how families can check their balances. So once you have enrolled in a flight lab and paid for that flight lab, and then you have an account in Flight Schedule Pro, and this won't happen most likely until we're right about to the start of the fall semester, but you'll see that balance in your Flight Schedule Pro account. So that's how families can check how much funds they have in their account at Akron. They have to do it through their student's account. So students, once you get your login information to Flight Schedule Pro, you can share that with your parents. So if you share that with your parents, then they can log in And on that first screen that you log in with your name, it has your balance right there. So they can see what your current balance is. You can as well. And then after each flight, you can ask dispatch to print out a summary of what you just did, and also that gives a summary of how much flying you just did, and then how much has been deducted out of your account. So you can track your balance after each flight if you would like to do so. And then there's just a note here just to keep in mind that flight labs are the way we determine the cost of a flight lab is based on the average amount of time it takes a typical student to complete those flight lessons. So that's pretty close to pretty accurate to what that flight lab should cost. We had an increase in flight costs this fall. We had an increase last fall. We had not had an increase in 5 years. So we spread that cost increase out over the last 2 years. So these costs are pretty accurate, but they're not always exact. So one student might go through their flight training a little bit faster. If that's the case, they get to the end of those lessons and they still have funds, then those funds roll over to the next flight lab. The opposite can be true as well. A student might do really well with one flight lab, and they get to the next and they're struggling and it's not clicking for them as easily. And if that happens, they get to the end of their funds and they still have lessons remaining. So if that's the case, then they need to add more funds to their account to finish that flight lab. Let's see, flex days. That's something that we have on Fridays and Saturdays at the airport. So students are assigned flight blocks on either Monday, Wednesday, or Tuesday, Thursday, and then Friday, Saturday are flex days. And we came about starting flex days in 2003, or 23, sorry. In 2023, that's when the university went to a 4-day week. And we were able to then add flex days in because students rarely have class on Fridays. Students are typically going to have their classes Monday through Thursday. So with that, students have more availability on Fridays and Saturdays. So opening up those days instead of having every flight block scheduled all day long, we've opened that up, and dispatch can then take a look and schedule anything that takes a longer period of time. So something like a check ride or a cross-country flight that can be scheduled in before the other students are scheduled. So students know that they will fly on either Friday or Saturday. They are assigned their time by 5 p.m. on Thursday for Friday, and then by 5 p.m. on Friday for Saturday. Students have said typically a lot of times it happens if they're Monday, Wednesday, 9 to 11, they can kind of anticipate they may be Friday, 9 to 11, but that's not a set time. That's absolutely not a guarantee. We want the students to remain flexible, but that's a lot of times that is what ends up happening. We do have cancellation fees, and we don't do that to try to punish or penalize the students. We really do that to try to have every student have an opportunity to fly when they're scheduled to fly. If we have students that don't arrive when they're supposed to, or they're late, or they're not prepared, then that keeps another student from getting that block and getting that opportunity to fly. So that's why we charge cancellation fees, is when students don't arrive prepared. So if a student cancels and it's within 2 hours of the time that they're scheduled, they will be charged. If a student does not arrive prepared, and that means that they don't have the materials they need, or they haven't studied and prepared for the lesson, or if they arrive late, any of those a student can be charged for that. And the policy now is that students are charged what they would have paid, what they're missing. So they're charged, so typically that can be about $300 per hour for the aircraft and the instructor. And we'll go over that more in the orientation, but just wanted to give you all a little bit of information on that. I've seen a few questions on flight blocks in terms of, if I haven't been scheduled for a flight block yet, when will I be scheduled for a flight block and how does that work? We are working hard to try to get everybody scheduled for a flight block. As soon as flight blocks become available, we're sliding students into flight blocks. So you will see students receive flight blocks as soon as they're becoming available. We will likely have some students that will not receive a flight block right away at the start of the fall semester. Some may not receive one until later in the fall semester, possibly the winter term, possibly even the spring semester, though I don't think that's very likely. All students are being scheduled into a ground school class. So then you're starting that ground school class, and once that flight block becomes available, since you're taking the ground school, you can go right into that flight block and start your flight training right away. So we are trying to get students scheduled as quickly as we can. Let's see. All right, so a few takeaways and just some things to kind of wrap this up is we really want you all to communicate with us. The more that you talk to us, the more that you come in and let us know how things are going, the more that you ask questions, the more that we can support you and help you. So we want you guys to come in and ask us questions. We want you to tell us if you need something, if you're confused, that we want you all to come into the aviation office. Please continue, if you send us an email, if you have a question, we are happy to help. I spoke a little bit about the medical certificate, but just to reiterate, you definitely need to have that medical certificate to start your flight training. And a big reminder that we have orientation on Tuesday, August 12th. That's at 4 p.m. That will be in Terry Concert Hall. That's for students and parents. So we would like to see all of you there on August 12th. We will have, I'll be there, Captain Tui, our director, will be there. Jenna from ACRON will be there. Likely one or two of our group managers from ACRON, Alan or Dobbin, will probably be there as well. And then we'll have Misty Pippin from Financial Aid to answer. She'll give a brief overview of financial aid and then be able to answer questions too. And then lastly, the one thing I wanted to touch on is our Aviation Ambassador Program. That is something that's for both aviation management and flight operations students. And so what that program is, we started that last year and we're continuing that. One of our students, Austin, who's on the panel, is an aviation ambassador. And what that is it's current students who are a little bit farther along in their training. They will be assigned, you will all be assigned to one of them. So each ambassador will have 4 or 5 new students, and they will send an email out to you all probably the week before or the week of the first, when classes start, just introducing themselves and just giving you guys an opportunity to ask them any questions that you might have. You don't have to respond to them, but if you would like to, you certainly can. They'll tell you about, we're going to have a help desk in the an aviation help desk in the College of Business that first week of classes. So you can stop by there if you have questions. We'll have an organization fair the second week of classes. So they'll tell you about that. They'll remind you when we have our career fair coming up in September. So any questions that you might have, you can ask them. Again, you don't have to even email them back if you don't want to, but if you have questions, they're a great resource and a great way for you to start getting connected within the aviation program, and just someone for you to reach out to if you do want to ask questions. Again, we'd love to see you guys in the aviation office. We want to help and have you in the aviation office, but sometimes the newer students are not as willing to come into the aviation office right away. So you've got those ambassadors that you can reach out to as well. So that is about all I had for the presentation. I'm going to pass it back to Julia.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Christine, for thoroughly going through all of those slides. I am going to ask just a couple of questions. Austin, we're going to start with you. Think back to your freshman year. What was it like that first semester? And is there anything that you feel helped that made you successful in the program?
Yeah, when I think back to my freshman year, which was not too long ago because time is flying, um, I think specifically for aviation that really helps me get to where I'm at now. It's just using all the resources that JU provides. Um, from our aviation tutors, which is a free resource that you absolutely can't beat. And going to that both if you're struggling on something or something's not clicking at the flight school, or just simply to get ahead, because you can never not learn something new in aviation. Um, and then at the flight school, specifically for me, backseating flights, backseating grounds, taking advantage of being a student here and taking advantage of getting, more information as much as you possibly can. And I know Jenna would definitely agree with me on that. You can't get enough backseating, and you can't learn too much. And then I would say, as much as you can manage getting involved. Um, it's a whole great community here at JU, and everyone wants to see you succeed. So getting as involved as you possibly can um, will definitely help your freshman year and make it feel so much easier.
Thank you, Austin. Mark and Lori, from a parent's perspective, and I know that you have one student that's already graduated undergrad from JU, is about to be in a third year of our law school, but you also have another student still in an undergrad and in aviation. What was something that you observed in Brandon's first year, if you can remember, that really helped him within this program?
Sure. Well, good evening, everyone. So glad that all of you are going to be part of JU Aviation. Not only are we parents of JU students, but Lori and I are also JU alums. We graduated from Jacksonville several years ago, and we are also co-chairs of the President's Parents Council. So we're very, very active in the university, and the university is a very special place for us. With Brandon, the first thing that he did when he his first semester was he didn't take a big course load. He didn't overload himself. I think he took 12 hours his first semester, so to kind of ease into it to his classes, so that he wasn't overwhelmed. He had time to concentrate on his classes, both aviation classes and his other classes, and on his flying. And in that first semester, he really developed on his own. He developed a plan, and he says, I've got a plan. I know what I want to do. I know where I want to be. As Captain Hughes says, usually first year is your private license, second year is instrument. Brandon wanted to be ahead of that, and he is. He's a little bit behind of his where he wanted to be, but he's ahead of that. This is year one, this is year two. And he put his plan together where he wanted to be. As Austin said, use the resources to help him, use the tutors to get ahead. And he has stayed down there in Jacksonville. We live in Atlanta. He has stayed there for summer schools, and he flies during the summer. He's taken some non-aviation classes during the summer to get those out of the way. He's taken some ground schools in the summertime. He flies during the summer to get ahead of that year one, this year two, that, and put himself on a plan. He knows where he wants to be. He's really taken ownership of that. And he tells us, hey guys, I got a plan. I know what I'm doing. Because we, as parents, we question a lot. Where are you? What are you doing? I got a plan. I know what I'm doing. And he's stuck to it. So get into see that first semester where you're at, what you're doing, and develop a plan for your student, or your student needs to develop a plan. He also got very involved in one of the fraternities on campus. He's a Pike, and Brandon said he thinks like about 65% of the Pike members are aviation students. So he's got a really good core of friends and resources. They study together. As Austin said, they backseat, they do all kind of things. So really get involved. Don't be bashful. Don't be shy that freshman year. Get involved and make a plan. And we saw that from him.
Thank you very, very much. Jenna, can you please tell us the biggest thing? I know that you really see the students as soon as they come join our community and really kind of start that first day of class. Can you tell us the biggest thing that really holds students back from beginning flying in their flight block?
Yeah, I think, a lot of students come in and it's a very exciting time. They're getting to fly in airplanes, become commercial pilots. I really think advocating for yourself is a big thing. We hype a lot on communication. We're not only teaching you to fly, but we're also teaching you how to act as a professional pilot in the real world. So I definitely think speaking up, asking questions, using the resources you have. We have a really great team of group managers which oversee our flight instructors. They're both graduates of this program, so they really know how things work. And using those tools that you have, Austin talking a lot about backseating and using the sims and the tutors, all those kinds of things are really important. Getting involved is your best friend in aviation. And I truly think like those are the students that we see succeed and then eventually go on to work for us, which is what our ultimate goal is. So definitely communication and advocacy.
Thank you, Jenna. Christine, I know that we had you talking a lot in the beginning, but what is the most common question that you hear from students and families as they kind of onboard that first week, as they're trying to navigate the ins and outs of the program? But what is the biggest thing that you hear?
When is my flight block, or how do I know when my flight block is? So the nice thing is now we have that on your schedule, so you can see it on MyCove as a student. So that's very helpful. We didn't have that last year, so hopefully that will reduce some of those questions, but that's usually the one that I see the most. Or can we make a change to that? And the answer to that is no, not that first semester. That is the flight block that you're assigned and that you're sticking with for that first semester.
Thank you. And Mark and Lori, is there anything that you wish you knew as we're kind of talking and preparing these incoming families for their experience here? I know that we have the orientation coming up in August. Is there something that you wish you knew prior to supporting Brandon in aviation?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, and not to dismiss any other majors, I think, going into college is a big transition from high school, but I think with aviation, it's a big responsibility. And I think with Brandon was the youngest of three boys. And I was that hover mom. I was kind of like, oh, he's the baby. Oh, Brandon, I'll do it for you. And when he went to college, I think going into aviation, not only are you dealing with your classroom classes, you're also dealing with time management, you're dealing with communicating with not only the university, you're dealing with, I want to call it L3, Akron, you're dealing with your instructor, you're dealing with a lot of people. And so they're dealing with, flight blocks, you're dealing with, if weather's bad, they can't just sleep through and go, it's raining. No, you have to check in with your instructor. You're dealing with, your account and your finances, you're dealing with your logbook. There's a lot of moving parts. And so they have to grow up real fast because guess what? You're 18 years old. Mom and dad can't do that anymore. And you have to do it. And, you can step in sometimes, that you have to step in and help them sometimes. But, when you get that phone call and they're like, Mom, can you do this? And you're like, you know what? You're 18. You got to handle it. And it's hard because you want to step in and do it, but you're like, you know what? You can handle it. You've got this. But I think, they have to grow up kind of fast because dealing with an airplane, it's a lot of responsibility. And I think, at first, you as a parent, you want to step in and do it for them. But then at the same time, you're going into a profession that requires a lot of responsibility. So I think going into aviation, it's I think double the responsibility. And that first semester was eye-opening. So that for us, I think as parents was kind of like, wow, because I remember leaving orientation, Mark and I looked at each other and went, wow, he had to sign all those papers. And, it was kind of like we walked out and go, okay, when are we going to get that first phone call? But, he did it. And we were very proud of him. And he's got it. I mean, when he told us he had a plan, and he's ever since. I remember calling Captain Hughes. There was something that happened and I talked to her and she's like, she talked me off the ledge, but I think it was more for me than him. But he's got it. But I think as a parent, it's a huge deal. But JU does a great job. But it's you got to think, they're in the sky and it's a big responsibility. So
they're going to mature fast.
Yeah, they mature
They're
really
going to
fast.
they're going to mature real fast.
But yeah, that I would say that's probably the biggest thing is responsibility and maturity.
Thank you. Thank you very much. To tie into that, Austin, talk to us a little bit about, I know you're very involved. Brandon is very involved. Talk to us a little bit about how you manage your time while you're getting kind of also that that normal college experience outside of aviation and outside of all these time commitments that this major does require.
Absolutely, and I think the Milovich just touched on it. Great. It is a lot, and there's a lot of responsibilities as an aviation student. So when it comes to involvement and splitting that difference, you really got to be on your game. And for me, that's really having a detailed schedule, every single day, where I'm at each time, and planning that out. And then, this is going to sound silly, but your alarms in the morning are really important. Don't miss class. Do not be late to the airport. And if you have a fellow problem like myself, it's sometimes snoozing your alarm. Make sure your alarm's out of reach. Turn off. I know it sounds dumb, but if it's out of reach, you have to get up. And once you're up, um, you'll stay up, and that will help. And then it's really important, communication. And that's with the flight school, that's with here at JU. Um, yeah, that's, you're working or you have involvements that require you to be gone on certain times. Communicate with Jenna in the flight school, give them you know, as much of a notice as you possibly can. It makes everyone's life easier. Um, and don't over involve yourself either. Just don't forget you're an aviation student first, um, and manage what you can and add more after your first semester. Take that first semester to really understand this is the times I'm going to be busy, this is how much time I have outside of it, and then go from there.
Thank you, Austin. I feel like that is, when we talk in admissions about this major, it is a lot of time management. And I feel like most of these individuals on the call can really speak to the students and how they transition into this time management requirement because it is so critical. I've seen a couple of questions about classes overlapping with flight blocks. My recommendation, Christine, do you have someone that you would like them to communicate with first, or would we want to push them to academic advising? What would you prefer?
For that, it really probably I'm the best point of contact for that, honestly. And then so you all can email me if that issue has arose. It should not have happened, but if it did, we'll take a look at it. I will probably put you back to academic advising because you'll likely have to change that class so that there is not a conflict. But if you want to start with me, that's probably the best place to start.
Okay. And just please bear with us. Like I mentioned before, this is a very, very large aviation class. And so we are doing our very best to ensure that students have their flight blocks, they have their courses, they have their core curriculum courses that they need. So please, if there is an issue, just reach out to us. Maddie Reynolds is also in this call. Maddie and myself can help. We can put you in contact with Christine. Christine is also an amazing resource. So please make sure that you are just going through the correct channels, but also give us a little bit of grace as we are just navigating. It's a lot. We have a lot of students coming in general to JU, so we just might need a couple of days to adjust some classes or open another section or adjust some things on the back end. So we appreciate you in advance. Jenna, what would be a piece of advice that you would provide to the incoming students and families on your behalf?
I definitely think communication really is key. I think we all can harp on that over and over and over again. Email is your friend. You guys, there's 100 and something of you all, and then around 200 and something current students. So sending things through email, giving us time to really answer them really does help. Or we all want to see you guys succeed. That's what we're all here to do. And I definitely think communication really is something that I think we all can do more of from everybody.
Thank you. There are a lot of questions here, so I am going to just ask a couple. Christine, you are welcome to pass any of these questions to individuals on the call as well, just because they may be specific to an individual, but are there campus jobs available in the aviation department?
I'll take that one. So there are, but they're mainly for when you have a little bit more experience. So one job that students have in aviation is being an aviation tutor. But for that, you have to have completed flight instructor ground school. That's one of the requirements. There's a lot of requirements, but that's one of the requirements. So you won't be able to do that till a little bit later. Another position, we have aviation ambassadors, and those are all volunteer, but there are 4 lead ambassadors that do get paid a little bit, but it's really not very much. It definitely would not be enough to be considered a job. So it's mainly just a very small amount. So those are really the only 2 in the aviation department, but there are other positions that you can get as a peer advisor, and we are looking for aviation peer advisors. And again, you need a little bit more. You need to at least have finished your freshman year to apply for that. But that is something where you're working for the College of Business, but you're advising aviation and business students on class selection. So that's a position where we would love to have more aviation students do that. But that just isn't something you can do right away your first semester.
Awesome, thank you. And if you order a performance pack, well, actually, let me ask another question. Austin and the Miloviches, did you all order a performance pack, or did you do individual items to ensure that you had enough to fly?
I don't think they had those when Brandon started.
Yeah, we went to one of the aviation stores online and bought a packet from that store. I don't know if L3
I don't think Kevin
was
used. Did they have those? Yeah.
No. That just
All
started
right.
last year.
Okay.
So we're making it easier.
Yeah.
So Christine, when a student orders that performance pack, or Jenna, when do they receive it? Is it sent to the home, or do they pick up actually at the school?
I'll let Jenna take that one.
Yeah, so the different performance packs, especially that tier 1, which is where you're getting the flight bag, the iPad, the headset, all the stuff you need, that is all going to be able to be picked up the Saturday before the semester starts on the 18th. You can also pick it up during the week of the 18th or the 19th, whatever day your flight block falls on. So they'll be available there. Some of them that are bigger, obviously, you kind of want to get them ahead of time, get your iPad charged up, get everything set up and good to go. But tier 3 is mostly just documentation that Akron provides. And so that can kind of wait till the day of.
Awesome, thank you. If a student does not receive their first class medical certificate by the time the semester starts, what happens to the assigned flight block?
Kind of twofold. If they have not received their medical certificate because they're unable to receive their medical certificate because the FAA is looking into, there's more work going on, then they will forfeit their flight block until they're able to get their medical certificate. So we want someone else to get that flight block. If the student is just not prepared and they don't have their medical certificate, then that unfortunately is them not being prepared for their flight block. So they've got a very small window to get prepared, like by the next time that they're supposed to be there, or then they're going to be considered not prepared and they'll start to get no-shows and get charged. So they need to have their medical certificate. If there's an outstanding reason, come and talk to us again. This is where the communication comes into play. We understand sometimes it's hard to get to an aviation medical examiner if you live. There's some that are very far away from where some people live. So we can work with you on that, but we need to know why and what's going on.
Awesome, thank you. I've had a couple of questions about polos. I think that the bookstore may be out of small and medium polos. Do they typically restock, Christine, or should they just order a larger size?
No, Austin's wearing one right now. If you guys see Austin in his shirt. They will restock, and I actually emailed with them, the bookstore, and heard back from them this morning. They said everything was in stock, but when I looked, it is not all in stock. So they will get that taken care of. You should be able to order them again soon. So don't worry about that. You definitely will be able to order those before you need to fly in the fall. So wait to get the right one that fits you. And we recommend that students get at least 2 polos. Depending on how often you're going to do laundry. If you're not going to do laundry as much, you might want to get 3 or 4. So
Thank you.
student preference.
I've also seen some questions about just general insurance. Is there anything else that a family needs to prepare, like personal insurance or flight insurance, or is this all inclusive in the program in our partnership with Akron?
It's all inclusive, and Jenna or the Miloviches, you guys can jump in at any point, but students are not required to get any additional insurance. They're covered as a student of JU, so they are not required to get any additional insurance. Some students do, but it's absolutely not required. It's not necessary. So there's nothing else that students need to do as far as aviation insurance.
Amazing. I will keep watching as questions come in, but I will ask for a piece of advice from individuals. I know Jenna provided a piece of advice for her, for the students and families, but Lori and Mark, would you please provide a piece of advice for these families coming in to JU and our community, but also aviation?
I'd say just get involved. There's a lot of things at JU for the students, a lot more than when we were there. And if a student is sitting in their dorm room, shame on them. I mean, they need to get out, break out of their shell, get involved in Greek life if that's their thing, get involved in one of the various clubs on campus, get involved with the aviation's programs. I'd say just get involved. Have your student get out there, get involved in the school. It'll make a great first semester. The other thing that I would say, and we experienced this with, as Lori said, Brandon was the youngest of 3. We had 3 boys, and this happened to all 3 of them. So they go down to school in August, and they're having a great time. They're out from under mom and dad's boot for the first time. They got, they're on their own. They're spreading their wings. They're trying to define themselves and everything. Usually about October, they get really homesick and they start questioning, did I make the right choice? Am I at the right school? What am I doing? And it might be something as simple, like for our boys, it was something as simple as bring them home for a weekend. They sleep in their own beds for a couple of nights. They get mom's home cooked meal, and then they're ready to go back to school. So don't be surprised if your student, around late September, early mid-October, calls you up and just like, I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm doing. It's just a phase. We've had other friends whose children have gone through some similar things. So don't be shocked if they call you up after being in school for a couple of months and pulling their hair out. It's just a part of the growing up process.
And to add on to what Austin said, is encourage them to take advantage of the resources in aviation. They will come up, they have various stage checks, especially that first semester when they have oral exams. Captain Hughes does a phenomenal job of doing like mock evaluations. And sometimes their pride, especially boys, will be like, no, I've got it. Encourage them to go to them. I think Captain Hughes puts up a notice and will say, we're doing one of those. And a lot of the kids will do it. And once Brandon took advantage of that, I think he goes to a lot of them now. And even they can sit in when their friends are doing it and take advantage of the resources. They're free. They can do the simulators. And once they put their pride aside and they start doing it, they realize how helpful they are. And I think all the aviation students, Austin, correct me if I'm wrong, they do it. And it's a great community. And they will realize, I think at first they're all kind of shy and they're like, well, I don't know if I really do, I need it. But that first oral exam, it's very intimidating. It's a couple hours long. And I know when Brandon went through his first one, he had never been through anything like that. And it was a shock. And after he went and realized, okay, I'm not sure I can do that. And then got a tutor and they prepared them for it. So make sure your student, encourage your student, no, go through one, sit through one, go through a tutor. Their instructors do it with them as well, but the resources are there, use them.
No, I love that advice. Austin, what would be your piece of advice for these students and families coming in, joining aviation, but also our JU community?
Yeah, I think everyone said great pieces of advice. Obviously get involved, but mine's going to be a little contradictory to that. I got very involved my freshman year. I'm also in Greek life, and there's a lot of big commitments that you can make getting involved. But my biggest piece of advice is going to be focus on your major. Um, as contradictory as it sounds, your decisions your freshman year um, towards your time at the flight school are going to have an impact on you all throughout your time here, as well as your future with whether that's working at the flight school or working at an airline or whatever path you choose to take. Um, so it's very important to use those resources we've got at the school and focus on your major first and your involvement second. And don't let your involvement take over the reason that you came to the school.
Thank you, Austin. Very well said. Last but definitely not least, Captain Hughes, is there any piece of advice that you would provide to these students and families as they join aviation, but also our JU community?
I think probably my biggest advice is don't be afraid to ask for help. Like, we all want to help you guys. We want you to be successful. Like, nothing makes us happier than to see, like, recently there was a picture on Instagram of three former students that are now all flying for Endeavor Airlines, and that nothing makes us happier than to see that. Like, that's what we want. We want to see all of you guys there in the future. So don't be afraid to ask us for help. We want to help you. We want you to be successful, but we can't help you if we don't know that you need it. So reach out, and reach out early. Don't wait till the end of the semester to reach out.
Thank you. I know that we had quite a few questions that were not able to be answered. Please do not hesitate sending those questions. There was a lot of questions and a lot of very particular questions per the individual. So we would love to answer those. We will be sending out this recording. If there's any additional questions that you may need, please feel free to reach out to anyone on this call. Again, we did have financial aid here. They were listening to just what some of the questions are, what they may need to push out. Captain Hughes is here for all of you to reach out to, myself, Maddie, Donna Cowley. We are more than happy to point you in the right direction or provide the correct information. But thank you very much for joining for our virtual information session for our aviation incoming students. We are so excited to see you all on Move-In Day, I think on August 12th, along with our orientation for aviation, which is also August 12th in the afternoon, early evening. If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. But thank you again. Thank you everyone for joining us on our panel. We could not do this without you. And we will see you all in August. If there is anything that anyone may need, please feel free to shoot us an email. We'll be happy to point you in the right direction. Thank you everyone and have a wonderful evening.